guy, we trust him. 75% of the people polled said they trusted Kim Jong-un. Wow. This is all, Ali, part of the charm offensive.
We need to remember all of the North Koreans who are not getting to see Kim Jong-un because they're in prison camps. He is starving them. Do you remember the North Korean official that ran across the border and was hospitalized, the soldier? They found worms. Worms
malnutrition, not enough calories, and this guy's in the army. John, there is a stark contrast here. Kim Jong-un snapping pictures, walking around. President Trump, by the way, feuding with our closest allies.
Democratic allies.
That's got to be something that the North Koreans and even the Chinese, who are really important to this conversation, are going to benefit from.
Well, one thing, Ali, we got to take into context the idea that time has passed. You know, clearly this is something that on the flight over to Singapore, this was a source of a lot of anger from the U.S. side. But now the preparations for this summit, this is a summit that's been in the works for months now. And most importantly, we're seeing on both sides, the U.S. and North Korean sides, very comprehensive leadership groups. This isn't just simply the idea of single leaders showing up, but rather their entourage. And this is what we're seeing in a lot of detail. And the teeing up for the meeting, where we're basically anticipating this idea of a joint statement, and then from that, the official opening of what is being framed as a denuclearization mechanism, a process to deal with these contentious, very complex issues in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Then even sitting down for this summit, we just articulated that it is a win for Kim Jong-un that he's there. It is also a win for the president and Mike Pompeo saying we're getting this meeting. The one White House meeting that President Obama had with Donald Trump after he won was North Korea is a big issue. The fact that Trump is just having this meeting, and tomorrow there will be a coordinated headline wrapped in a big red bow before they leave. I mean, leaving just 11 hours from now. Will President Trump and Kim Jong-un, John, get to check this off as a win, even if once you dig into it, there's nothing under the hood?
Well, Stephanie, the thing about this meeting is that these two leaders will be assessing themselves in the sense of their grade that they give to themselves is a very subjective one. And with that, the idea of a goal in terms of laying out for the next step, we're basically seeing this idea of an incremental approach. The key thing to remember, though, a lot of the key capitals in the region are focused on the Singapore summit because they can only move full force in their respective mechanisms in dealing with North Korea, be it economic development, permanent peace mechanism, so forth, if this official launch of the denuclearization mechanism happens. So from that perspective, there is a linkage, but ultimately it's subjective in terms of how these leaders assess themselves, and so far it looks like it's going to be a very high grade.
Hey, Bill, former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Mike McFaul, wrote that this summit is a tremendous achievement for North Korea. The point he makes is that, this was a tweet from his, says, tomorrow the entire world will be treating Kim Jong-un as a global leader on stage with the leader of the most powerful country in the world. Human rights, assassinations abroad, etc. will unlikely be mentioned. This is a tremendous achievement for North Korean diplomacy. Bill, do you share that view with or without an adequate result? Has Kim Jong-un been elevated to a status of world leader as opposed to world pariah as a result of this meeting?
I think, Ali, he's not only out of his hotel, he is out of international isolation. So in that sense, it's already a win for him. He's met President Xi of China, President Moon, now Singapore's Prime Minister. Tomorrow, it'll be President Trump. Then he'll probably go to Moscow and meet President Putin. You know, he is no longer an international pariah, so he wins. But the idea of this summit, in a sense, is not a zero-sum game where only one leader wins. You know, I think genuinely the hope of the White House is that in the end, North Korea can win too, in a way, through economic development. And, you know, it'll be absolutely fascinating tomorrow morning to see these two leaders, and all eyes will be on the first 5 minutes, because that's what President Trump said it would take him to know whether Kim Jong-un was serious enough. And those kinds of personal relationships, of course, we know are important to President Trump. We just saw how personal relationships can, in fact, go very badly wrong at the G7 with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada. And mentioning that, you know, Kim Jong-un is out on the town tonight, but today it's inconceivable that he and his advisors didn't talk about what happened at the G7, because there was President Trump with his friends agreeing something and then getting on the plane and reneging on his agreement. The North Koreans must be saying, and they presumably said it about the Iran deal as well, if the US and if President Trump signs an agreement, is it worth the paper it's written on? How can we trust this man? And of course the US is saying, how can it trust North Korea, which has a long record of breaking agreements? You only have to look back to 1994, and indeed some of the North Koreans who are here now were here then. They made an agreement and they clearly began to break it very quickly, so that in 2002 we discovered secret nuclear facilities and so on. So tomorrow morning, one-on-one discussions with just translators. You know, Ali, there are echoes here of Reykjavik, of Reagan and Gorbachev sitting down to talk about nuclear weapons. And remember Reagan's phrase, trust, then verify. But those meetings, those 5 summit meetings, were about building trust. So the question about tomorrow's summit is it Reykjavik or is it Munich 1938, where Chamberlain and Hitler met to build trust, and Chamberlain came out with a piece of paper saying, peace in our time. We know what happened a year later. Trust was busted. So which is this summit tomorrow? Is it Reykjavik or is it Munich?
Yeah, good question. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks, Bill Neely and John Park.
Ali, I just keep thinking about the last 4 days. President Trump, on his own, he wasn't asked about it, said G7, it should be the G8, saying let's bring in Russia, almost dismissing the annexing of Crimea, which is the reason Russia isn't part of it. So there's President Trump turning his back on our G7 allies, democratic leaders, siding with Russia and sitting down with Kim Jong-un, calling him a nice guy. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. And just moments ago, just as we said, Kim Jong-un, he toured parts of Singapore ahead of tonight's summit. But the meeting, it's going to be missing an important element on the American side, a really important element. This is a nuclear summit. There's no nuclear experts there. We're going to look at the unprecedented resources it would take to actually denuclearize North Korea. It's a big deal. More than just a handshake, smile, and a winning headline. You're watching Velshi and Ruhle. Welcome back to Velshi and Ruhle. Just moments ago in Singapore, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un stole the spotlight ahead of tonight's historic summit with President Trump. Just a short time ago, Kim hit the streets with his motorcade, taking a sightseeing walk among popular tourist sites in Singapore. The foreign minister of Singapore joined him for the drive, the two even taking a selfie during the trip and posting it on Twitter. As
the leaders prepare for the summit, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is pushing back against the New York Times report suggesting that President Trump could be handicapped during the nuclear talks because there are no top scientists in his administration or with him in Singapore. The Times report
cover denuclearization.
It is inherently a scientific issue. The Times reports that Donald Trump is the first U.S. president since 1941 not to name a science advisor. And quote, people who have participated in past nuclear negotiations say the absence of such high-level expertise could put him at a tactical disadvantage.
This morning, Pompeo called out the Times report directly.
For over 3 months, an interagency working group of over 100 experts across government has met multiple times per week to address technical and logistical issues associated with dismantling North Korea's weapons programs. They include experts from the military charged with dismantling nuclear weapons, the Department of Energy, including PhDs and experts from DOE labs, and officials from the intelligence community covering North Korea.
Joining us now, John Holdren, an expert in nuclear arms control and former White House science advisor, Joe Cirincione, president of the Global Security Foundation, the Plowshares Fund, and NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely back with us in Singapore. All right, John, I got to go to you first. You were President Obama's science advisor. How big a deal is it? How critical is it to have someone with that type of expertise in this administration and in Singapore right now?
Well, first of all, I think it is crucial that every president of the United States should have a science and technology advisor in the White House, not only to be able to tell the president what insights from science and technology are germane to whatever policy issue happens to be on his plate, but also to connect him with the most appropriate people across the administration for more detailed scientific insights than might be available within the White House. In the case of the Singapore summit, I think it would be important to have someone who's a real expert on nuclear weapon science and technology and verification science and technology at the president's elbow, so that as the conversation proceeds, if issues come up where the technical details may matter, the president has authoritative answers at hand.
And Joe, we saw this in the Iran deal, although that took, sort of 10 years to hammer out. But toward the end of it, Ernie Moniz was the Secretary of Energy. He had a great deal of experience in this sort of stuff. But the Washington Post reports that this decision by Trump and Kim to begin the Singapore summit without their top advisors or nuclear arms specialists underscores that their real goal here is to develop a personal rapport and stage a global spectacle rather than ink the technical details of a denuclearization accord. Now, Joe, this is a short meeting. While there are probably side meetings going on and technical discussions going on, is it possible that this is just rapport building and a real deal comes later with some real scientific work?
If that's all it is, it will be a failure. It'll be a success for Kim, as you pointed out. He already has his success, but if you come out of here with just a meet and greet, that's going to be seen as a failure for President Trump, and I don't think he can afford two major international failures in the span of 2 days. And the things that you'll agree with may be general, there may be principles, but under those are going to be implications that will require detailed understanding of what you're agreeing to. And you can't do this without qualified technological and scientific advice. John Holdren is one of the brightest scientific minds in this country. And when President Obama was negotiating the Iran deal, he had John's advice with him and Ernie Moniz, who was the chairman of the physics department at MIT. Right. That quality is what's lacking from this summit.
All right, then, Bill Neely, come back and walk us through what's actually happening there, because when we talk about the importance of this nuclear summit, the president is not flanked by science guys, and we're looking at those images of Kim Jong-un doing a sightseeing tour. If he's doing a sightseeing tour, and the reason he's even getting this stage is because of his nuclear capabilities, how realistic is it for us to believe anything significant or tangible will come out of this as it relates to denuclearization?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. The nuclear weapons are exactly the thing that has got him to this summit. They are one of the things that ensures his survival. So, as lots of experts, far more clever than me, have said, why on earth would he ever give them up on a promise from the United States, from a president who appears to be breaking agreements with his friends? So this is the great dilemma. And, when we talk about tonight, a similar kind of question comes into your head. Kim walking around Singapore. Is this a genuine transformation, more proof of the new side of Kim Jong-un, or is this a cynical exploitation of his moment in the limelight, a moment where he can exploit the United States, where he can fool the world into some kind of an agreement while, in some mountains somewhere in North Korea, his scientists continue to do their work? And by the way, it's naive to believe that his scientists aren't still working on the nuclear program right now. Right. And when you talk about irreversible denuclearization, you can't have it, really, because you can't unlearn what you already know. So there are so many, we are in, as Donald Trump, I think, said, we are in uncharted territory here. There are more unknowns than there are knowns. So, a lot of the questions that we ask, I genuinely think there are no answers to.
John, we are discussing, and viewers will be hearing over the next 12 to 16 hours, the term CVID a lot. It stands for Complete Verifiable undeniable, irreversible denuclearization, as Bill just said. Washington's goal, this is what Washington wants out of this North Korean nuclear program. That includes dismantling and removing nuclear weapons, stopping uranium enrichment, disabling reactors, closing test sites, and allowing weapons inspectors into any facility at any time. John, what is your sense of North Korea's ability to meet these standards, assuming they would even agree to?
Well, of course, I think Bill got it right when he said there is really no such thing as irreversible nuclear disarmament, because the knowledge cannot be erased. And the question is, how big are the barriers that one can put in the way of reconstituting a nuclear program? Another question is, in a society that's one of the most closed societies in the world, maybe the most closed society in the world, how much confidence can one have that there aren't scientists and technologists beavering away inside a mountain, or that there aren't simply some significant number of nuclear weapons that are hidden away? That's going to take extremely intrusive verification, with inspectors able to go anywhere within the country that they think might be relevant. And it's very, very difficult to imagine the North Koreans agreeing to that. I would love to be surprised, by the way. I would love to be surprised and find that Kim Jong-un really is serious about being willing to get rid of his nuclear weapons and his nuclear weapons capability, at least for the time being. But that really remains to be seen, and it's a very iffy proposition, given the history of North Korea in these matters, the agreements, previous agreements that they have broken, and again, the fact that it's an extremely closed society.
Joe, is it possible we get to the point where we're even talking about verification if North Korea decides to go ahead with a deal?
Yes, it is, Ali. And in fact, the Iran deal, the deal that President Trump just violated, is a model for how to do this. Very detailed step-by-step process where you take a step, you verify that it's been completed, then you take another step. In fact, John and I have a colleague, Sig Hecker, the former director of Los Alamos National Laboratory, with Dr. Bob Carlin, just did a comprehensive plan for how you would do this, how you would actually denuclearize North Korea, and they did it up at Stanford University. You can Google Sig Hecker North Korea and get it. There's about 300 steps involved.
Wow.
And it will take anywhere between 5 and 15 years. And you realize when you break a problem like this down to its components, yes, you can do it. It all depends on political will and the willingness to actually implement that plan.
Okay, guys.
Can I just say?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just like to say I'd be a lot happier if Sig Hecker were sitting at President Trump's right hand during these discussions. And of course, he is not.
Exactly.
All right, John Holdren, Joe Cirincione, and Bill Neely, thanks to all of you for this. Bill, of course, will be standing by. This summit is expected to, our coverage of it is going to start at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. So it's overnight now. It is 11:30 at night in Singapore. Hopefully everybody's getting into bed and they're going to have a good early breakfast and start this thing early in the morning.
Hopefully they've got a room with air conditioning. Next, President Trump's trade war with Canada escalating as his top advisors completely attack Justin Trudeau in the harshest of terms and misrepresent what Trudeau said on Saturday. This comes, of course, as the president claims the U.S. has a trade deficit with Canada. For fact's sake, why Trump, the president of the United States, the business president, is wrong on the numbers, the actual facts.
All right, we're also watching the markets. They're staying stable right now, despite both the trade war and Trump's rhetoric. Here is a live look at the Dow right now. That is about as flat gets. We'll have more on that.
You got to remember, when you look at the markets, it's been a lot of talk from the president. Right. He hasn't implemented that much yet, and the markets, they're basically ignoring it.
Yeah, we'll have more on that coming up. You're watching Velshi and Ruhle live on MSNBC.